All right, so hello again and welcome to today's webinar, The Trifecta of Charging Success, Operations and Maintenance, in partnership with ACT News and Terawatt Infrastructure. My name is Eleni Petro. I'm a Senior Director at Gladstein Neandros and Associates, or GNA, which is part of TRC, a leading national provider of engineering and consulting solutions supporting a clean energy future. I will be your host and moderator today as we learn about operationalizing, managing, and maintaining charging infrastructure, as well as ways to ensure operational continuity across multiple charging sites. So before I get started, there are just a few housekeeping items that I'd like for you to keep in mind. So all of the slides from today's webinar are going to be available and sent to all registrants following the webinar. We'll do our best to dedicate as much time as possible to a live Q&A at the end. So please submit any questions you have by using the Q&A box that's in the upper right-hand corner of your screen, and you can direct that to the organizer. So at the end of the webinar, before you close your browser, we also would love for you to complete our quick 30 seconds. It's an opportunity for you to let us know what topics that you'd like to see discussed in the future. Also, we'll have a recording of this webinar that's going to be sent out next week to the email address that you used to, and the recording will also be available on ACT News. And if you experience any technical issues or you need assistance during the webinar, please email GNA Marketing using the email address that you see on the screen. We have that email address on the screen. I will be sure up there. There we go. Excellent. So please email that address if you have any technical issues, and we will also drop that email in the chat, so we'll assist you and get you back in the groove. So without any further ado, let's get to it. I'd like to introduce Peter Cohen. He is the Senior Director of Business Development from Terawatt Infrastructure. Thanks, Peter.
All right, thanks, Eleni. I'm so really excited for this panel today. I'm joined by George Balaban and Rich Frakes from Desert Cab, who we've been working with, and we'll talk more about their operations and the solutions that Terawatt's providing to Desert Cab. But first, I'd like to introduce Terawatt and discuss a little bit more about, if you know of us, we're mostly known for developing charging infrastructure. Today, we'll talk about everything that happens after the charging infrastructure is commissioned and turned online. It's very important to us in our mission. So really excited to have the audience and hope you all enjoy. Can you go to the next slide, please? So Terawatt, we raised $1 billion of capital to put towards charging infrastructure solutions for our partners to enact on our mission, which is to power electrified fleets with the most reliable network of charging solutions. Reliable is bold, today and always. For us, it's really important that the infrastructure we're providing for our partners works day in and day out, and that we can be that value-added partner that lets them focus on their core business. There's a lot to discuss about charging infrastructure, developing it, implementing it, and today we're going to talk about keeping it online every single day. Can you go to the next slide? So charging is pretty complicated. We have a lot of skiers here at Terawatt, so we have this green, blue, black diamond analogy for some visuals. But the idea is that, at small scale, at 10 cars, it's still pretty robust. If you put in 10 level 2 chargers, which is the type of charger you put in your garage if you have an electric vehicle at home, that can be tens of thousands of dollars, take about a month. Hopefully you can facilitate that with on-site power that you already have. But as you scale with more vehicles, or if you have heavy duty equipment, the cost can get dramatically more expensive exponentially. So in the millions of dollars, timeline can increase, the complexity of the infrastructure goes up pretty quickly. And so obviously with that kind of investment, you want to make sure that you are maintaining and operating that infrastructure and facilitating your fleet in the best way possible. And that's what we're going to talk about today. So at Terawatt here, we provide solutions both for the infrastructure as well as maintaining it, and in providing that solution to our partners. So go to the next slide, please. So we kind of divide our solutions into two parts. I started to allude to that already. So charging infrastructure being on Terawatt's own property. So we have a portfolio of sites across 19 states that we're developing into charging centers that fleets can access, whether they be private for one fleet or shared amongst multiple. We also provide that same expertise on a customer's own site. So we call it a constellation of solutions, where you might have some charging behind the fence at your property, some on Terawatt sites. That might be different if you're a national fleet, region by region. but really trying to be a one-stop shop for all of your needs to develop the charging infrastructure as you start electrifying your fleet from internal combustion engines today, and what that scaled process looks like over time. And then charging services is what we'll talk about today, which is for any charging that we develop or work with a customer's existing charging that they've developed themselves, operating and maintaining it and giving the tools through software to make sure that you have everything you need to keep your fleet running by operating that charging infrastructure. So you go to the next slide, please. Thank you. So reliability, what are we talking about with charging infrastructure? What does this mean in terms of making sure that it works every single day? There was a study from the Bay Area that surveyed a random sampling of public charging infrastructure. So that's if you have a passenger vehicle and you're going to at your local supermarket or something like that, and they found that 23% of the time the chargers were not working. And so that means twice a week for a driver. And if you're a passenger and maybe you charge mostly in your garage if you can, or you are going out and running errands, whatever you're doing amongst your day, if a charger's down, that's not mission critical necessarily. It could be, but you can go to the next stall over, you can go to a different supermarket. Ideally, that's not impacting your day-to-day too much. But if you're a fleet, that's pretty unacceptable. And so we're trying to move that decimal point here at Terawatt one place over to 0.227% or 98% uptime, which is chargers are failing once a year for a driver. For every fleet, and we are entirely fleet focused here at Terawatt, and it's part of why we are engaging in the solutions that we have developed. That is mission critical to either the revenue source of your business, if you're like Desert Cab and you run a taxi fleet, or enabling your business. Maybe you're a CPG company and you have to move your product to the shelves. Chargers that are down means that vehicles can't operate. Vehicles that can't operate mean you can't do your business. So we are dead focused on that reliability, why it's bolded in our mission, and providing solutions to enable that in an electrified world. Can you go to the next slide, please? So additional things to consider when operating and maintaining charging infrastructure, charging success. So that's kind of that reliability piece, making sure that there's predictable and reliable charging sessions that is not necessarily industry standard in public charging, but for fleet operations needs to be. You need to know that with confidence that you can operate your business in the way you need it to, knowing that the charging simply just works. Scalability also, as your fleet changes over time, you might have different types of vehicles. You might need different speeds of chargers. This might be different if you have a fleet across multiple facilities. So today we are not developing charging infrastructure in terms of building the hardware, but we manage across multiple different hardware providers such that fleets can select the vehicles they want, work with the hardware that best suits the job that they need to have done, and make sure that that's facilitating their business. Again, going back to the core of letting fleets focus on their core business, which is moving vehicles in the industry we work with, and not having to worry about all of these considerations for what does charging mean and how do I engage with it. Data-driven operations, another piece of that. So proactive and accurate action to make sure that you're meeting and working with the charging infrastructure. Remote management, again, to make it more efficient. Look at multiple facilities if you have them. Ease of use, reporting. Oftentimes, and George and Rich will talk about this, there's grant compliance that you need to consider when you're paying for this infrastructure. Engaging with qualified technicians, energy management. So the list goes on, but the point being, we are trying to be that provider and partner as an extension of a team of whatever fleet we work with, such that, again, they can focus on their core business, keep vehicles moving, and have a trusted partner that this is all we do every single day. Can you go to the next slide? So we break our solutions into two pieces. One is software, and one is operations and maintenance. So software is the tool that we use to engage with the chargers, and operations and maintenance are the services to be provided to make sure that the chargers are operating at optimal performance and fixing any issues as they arise. So the software piece, that's a charge management system that we have here at Terawatt that we've developed with a fleet-focused set of features, ranging from charging scheduling, energy management, reservations, billing, reporting. I'll talk about that in a second. And then operations and maintenance is having a team in place to operate as an extension of a fleet's own team. That's a 24/7 call center, proactive monitoring of the charging, engaging to make sure that anything that might arise, we are flagging, and then maintenance being boots on the ground, or remote actions to correct issues as much as we can through software. Again, all coming back to that same point of 98% reliability, keeping the chargers up and running, making sure that the vehicles keep moving. Can you go next? Great. So this is one snapshot of some of the functionality that our software provides. So here you can see there's what you would see if a vehicle is plugged into a charger, where you can get state of charge. So that's how much, what is the battery's percentage of completed charge. So here in the graph, it's 77%. You can see if you have multiple vehicles plugged in where they're at with their charging session to know when they can get back on the road. We also have some remote functionality here, so we can start and stop charging. We can reboot a charger if necessary, if it goes down. We can see the energy usage over time with in each charging session. And this really gives you the insight to understand what is happening currently amongst my charging infrastructure. If I have 10 chargers, how many vehicles are plugged in, where are they, what's my energy usage? And then we can also tie that into the features that we have for reporting. So if I look at a snapshot of my fleet over time, when am I using the most power? How efficient am I being? We can do a lot of analysis to understand what does this mean for my business, as well as give you the insight at a given moment to look at how am I doing right now? How is my fleet performing? How's my infrastructure? Are there any issues that arise? All from that one pane of glass, single standpoint to look into what's going on with your fleet. Can you go next? So the remote operation here, the remote monitoring, really gives you a lot of power to not have to go out and inspect every single charger manually. Maybe you have a different person who's responsible for overseeing charging infrastructure than is the person who's actually the boots on the ground. As well, this is something that we can really add value from a remote partnership perspective of giving you the power to focus on your business. Terawatt can be that partner watching the chargers. So we combine this with SMS or email alerts to signal to a dispatcher or a facilities manager, hey, look, charger 5 is done. Go tell the driver to go get their vehicle, things like that. We can also monitor activity for all the charging sites in one place. So if you have multiple facilities, you can filter facility by facility or get a whole snapshot of everything that's happening. As a lot of fleets that we talk to, maybe they have their initial pilot, but they're expanding to multiple facilities over time. You need to be able to look at that across all of the operations that you have and make sure you're monitoring them effectively. Accurately diagnosing failures, this is really important. So quickly identifying and resolving issues from a central management point is really efficient. That way you don't have to go out and find out that the charger's not working by looking at it. You get an alert, you can quickly diagnose and assess any problems. And then keep tracking of the vehicle's location. This is a really exciting one where with telematics integrations, not only when the vehicle is plugged into the charger can we see where its state of charge is, but when it's in the field operating on its path, you can see where it is, how far away from base it is, and you can help with our scheduling engine come back to base, understand what the most efficient usage of charging is, and alleviate that range anxiety that comes up as a point for most fleets. Next. Thank you. So this is kind of the a view that you would see of all of your chargers. So you can see there's 2 vehicles plugged in, a couple available chargers, a snapshot that our CMS outputs as well. A talking point here is we can talk about scheduling when the most efficient way to charge your fleet is. So what times of day, you can lower energy usage for your facility, as well as also in most tariffs for utilities, not all kilowatt hours are created equally, meaning the cost of energy might be less expensive overnight than during the day, when all the lights are turned on for most people. So we can think about scheduling a efficient energy pattern so that you minimize your cost, that total cost of ownership that comes up a lot for fleets. So understanding when should I charge my vehicles, what's the most effective way, what's the most efficient use of that infrastructure that I invested in, something that our system enables for fleets. Can you go next? And so we've talked about the software, kind of the tool, giving you those remote monitoring, those remote monitoring functionality. And then the monitoring service and operations that we provide as a partner to you is something also that helps you focus on your business and us be that partner to make sure that any problems that are arising are taken care of. We're doing preventative actions to make sure that they don't arise. So that's 24/7 proactive monitoring, giving data-driven guarantees about issue resolution. EVSE preventative maintenance, so making sure that we are fixing things before they come up. So, sending out technicians, making sure we're assessing problems. Spare parts management is something that we also handle. So understanding, okay, great, what are the common things that break or might break, and to make sure that, oh, it's out of stock is not an issue for why your charger is not up and running, and it's not an issue for keeping vehicles moving. Digital tracking system for engaging with any tickets that arise, so you can see, oh, great, that thing I flagged last week is being resolved. Here's where it is, and here's the estimated resolution time. And then all of that kind of packaged into an offering that you can rest easy knowing that you're in good hands with someone who this is all they focus on all day. Next, please. So I will turn it over now to Rich and George, who will give an overview of what Desert Cab is, what they've been doing with the EVs in their fleet, and then we'll kind of go into like a fireside chat with some questions that I think should be helpful and relevant to the audience members, and we can open it up to a general Q&A.
Good morning, everyone. My name is George Balaban, and me and my family operate two taxi cab companies in Las Vegas, Nevada. I'm kind of going to introduce kind of how we got to where we are at this point. We have 361 medallions and about 400 vehicles that we operate in Las Vegas. Las Vegas is a heavily regulated taxi cab market, so our growth is limited. The number of medallions, the 361 medallions we have is limited by the state. So having a limited number of medallions, it's important for us that we get those medallions out on the road as many times as we can, as many hours of the day as we can. So in a perfect world, we'd like to see those 361 medallions on the street at all times. The extra cars, the 50, 60 extra cars we have above that is for preventive maintenance, wrecks, we have spare cars, but the 361 we want to try to have out at all times. So that means involving having cars out on double shifts. So that switching to the EV for us was going to be a challenge because, again, we know when it's busy in town, there's a natural lull probably between 2 in the morning and 6 in the morning each day, maybe not as much on the weekends, but we have a little 4-hour window that we can change shifts from the night driver to the day driver. But in the afternoons, when we switch from day driver to night driver and to get the car back out on the street, historically we've used ICE cars, the internal combustion engine cars, and we can gas those up in several minutes. So switching to EVs was going to be a challenge with that afternoon shift change. So we had that in mind. But we decided we needed to jump in kind of with both feet on this EV conversion because we kind of saw the writing on the wall, with the current administration and the climate change and the push for EVs and clean energy. We saw the grants and opportunities that were out there for money for building infrastructure, the federal incentives to buy EV cars. OEM appeared to be phasing out ICE cars, so we thought we needed to at least try EVs and see how they were going to work. So that's kind of how we decided we needed to jump in. So we have currently 25 EVs of our fleet. It's a mix of a couple low-end entry-level cars like the Chevy Bolts and the Nissan Leafs. I think we have like 8 of those, and the remaining 17 EVs are the couple Ioniq 5s, which are Hyundais, and then the rest are Ford Mach-E's, which are a little bit higher end vehicles, but about 25% of our fleet. So for us, again, when we decided we were going to just jump in, we needed to get going on this to get ahead of the curve. We went out and, well, it was kind of a multi-fold reason that we were going to convert. We were partnered with a company that was looking to possibly acquire us. They wanted to electrify the entire fleet. So we decided, maybe we should start putting some EVs in good faith into our fleet to see how they were going to work. So that was part one. 2 was, of course, we saw this coming and we decided we needed to move into the EV section. Again, the grant money. So we were able to get our local infrastructure, NV Energy, our local energy company, gave us a $90,000 rebate to put in some original, our first phase of charging, which we did. As we installed that, we continued to kind of add some cars into the fleet. But for us, again, we needed to figure out originally what kind of cars we needed. You hear all of the advertisements about the range of a vehicle, how fast they can charge, but we didn't know any of this. So we kind of just jumped in because we needed to see what was going to work as a taxi cab, find out if they were durable. Our ICE vehicles, we can run for hundreds of thousands of miles with just changing an engine. So again, we bought a mix of EVs to see if they were going to hold up. We know anecdotally that the maintenance cost would be less for EV than an ICE vehicle because there's no oil or anything in the car. But again, until you go do it, you don't really know. So we bought multiple ones of them to see how they were going to hold up. And that kind of got us into the situation again to learn all kinds of things as to how fast they would charge. Our original infrastructure we put in a lot of level 2 chargers, which take 7-8 hours to charge a vehicle. We put in 2 level 3 chargers, which are the fast chargers, which we can charge a car in 30 minutes. But for us, again, as we have been getting to grow, we needed just to figure out how it was going to work for us to be able to do a shift change in the afternoon and how fast we could turn cars over. 25 of them is one thing, but if we were going to expand to 400 of them, how were we going to be able to do that? And we needed to learn charge cycles, range, find out if the drivers were going to, what the acceptance was going to be from drivers. A lot of drivers had range anxiety. So that's kind of where we got to at this, where we're at right now. And that's how we ended up dealing with Terawatt, because they were going to be a good partner to help us figure out this math problem of our vehicles and how do we charge them efficiently? How do we track all of our infrastructure? Because we are going to build a phase 2 of our charging because we received another grant, and that's going to involve putting in a lot more level 3s. So Terawatt has come in with us to tie into our technology that we already have in our taxi cabs. So that's kind of an introduction of how we kind of got started and what our fleet's about. And Rich can talk a little bit more about what we're doing with the charging.
Hi, my name's Rich Frakes, the general manager for Desert Cab. I've been in the taxi business since 1986. 20 of those years I've been with George. So we work pretty well together. We have a mixture of cars, like George said. We have the ICE cars, hybrid cars, EVs now. So we had to learn fast on the what types of EV cars, like you just talked about the Bolt and the Leaf. Really, when we started this, George said, hey, we got to get into this. We looked at a couple of the Leafs and a couple of the Bolts, and we just bought a level 2 charger and stuck it in the wall on the side of the shop. So we didn't know anything about how much the energy we were using or anything like that. We just knew that we were getting a power bill, right? So that's as we team up, with Terawatt, they help us manage that, how much energy that we're using for each car. It allows us to see, what our costs are when it comes to the charging. So since early 2021, as we started adding the cars, like George said, so we've got up to 25 cars. So we wanted to diversify our fleet a little more green, because we didn't know what was going to happen with the OE cars. The manufacturers are building these cars and they're pushing all these EVs to go where we're going to go. So we just wanted to be ahead of the game, which normally, here Desert Cab, we try to be ahead. We're the first people to have credit card machines in the cars. We have smart meters. Throughout all these years, we try to be ahead of innovation. So right now, we're the only ones in Las Vegas that have any EV cars. I think we probably have one of the largest EV fleets in the country right now, as running as a taxi cab. But anyways, again, partnering with Terawatt, you know, we wanted to plan for the future. The infrastructure, the charge optimization, they're really helping us with how we're going to charge the cars. It's my job to make sure that all the cars go out. George talked about double shifting. It's my job to make sure that I got drivers to drive the cars, to double shift cars, right? So when we first got the cars, I wanted to make sure that the cab drivers would actually drive them. So we picked a few guys out that would drive them. Some guys wouldn't drive the cars at all because of range anxiety. They would go, you know, they drive their car to empty on an ICE car, but they drive it to 25% on in an EV car, and they bring it back. Oh, I'm gonna run out of energy, right? So that was a big challenge to try to get the drivers to drive them. So that's kind of where we're at with that. But now that we have different, you know, we had to learn the ranges with the Bolt. We get the Bolt for, I think we had it about 3 months, and then they say, oh, you can only charge it to 80%, or they might catch on fire. So we're like, oh, oops, you know, we kind of made a mistake, somewhat of a mistake when we bought those, and we never had an issue. You can see there's one in the picture on the slide there. Those cars have a low, you know, range, so they can only go out once a day. So they don't really work as a double shifted cab, not like the Hyundai or the Ford. Those cars have a lot larger range, and it takes less time to charge them in between shifts. So that's pretty much what, you know, where we're at with this right now. So I'll run it back over to Peter.
Great. Thanks, George and Rich. It's really helpful to have that context. And if you go to the next slide, I have just a couple questions that I think would be helpful for the audience to kind of think about. So, you know, you have a mixture of L2 and L3 chargers, and we've talked a lot about the difference of what that means to you. Could you speak a little bit about, from an operations and maintenance perspective, what you see as, you know, the difference and the value you get out of one versus the other? You know, the fast charger, obviously more throughput, but obviously a little more complex of hardware. You know, just what you've seen in terms of operating and maintaining those so far.
So yeah, so Peter, sure. Again, this has been a real learning process for us. When we put in the first level 3 chargers, which we knew we were going to need because you need to fast charge the vehicles, the level 3 chargers that we received were dual port level 3 chargers. But even though they were dual port, meaning you could plug 2 cars in at a time, they only charged 1 car at a time, which didn't really make a lot of sense. We also had a issue with the amount of actual power we had at our facility. So you're limited. That is something that you'll find out as you're putting in charging, that you have a capacity limits with the transformers that you have at your facility. So we kind of maxed out what we could install. We installed a lot more level 2s than we ultimately ended up needing or thinking that we needed. We put in 25 of those, but those were a challenge as well. We put in what we thought were state-of-the-art ones. None of them worked. They switched them out, luckily. The level 3s that we put in, like I said, wouldn't charge 2 cars at the same time. So we paid to upgrade to get the level 3s that we have now. But again, being new to this, these level 3 chargers we have, they didn't come with cord management systems, and the cords are very heavy. I mean, surprisingly heavy. They're very fragile. If you drop them, they break. We can't work on them ourselves. The parts aren't just interchangeable. You need to be a charging technician to change these things out. So there were lots of things that we learned as we were going. And what we learned was we need a partner that really understands all this. Like you said in your introduction, we need to focus on running a cab company. And that means keeping the cabs on the road. Run them in the day shift, get them in, switch drivers, get them fueled up, charged up, whatever, and get them back out on the road. And having, while we have our own shop and a lot of mechanics to work on cars, no one, in my business knows how to work on any of these chargers or track any of this.
Mhm.
So again, the idea of having an O&M company like you guys that can come in and help us, that we can ask questions about, that can also share with us what other people are doing, because you do need to have someone to be having my general manager walk around outside to go see which chargers are working or not working is not efficient. We need to have some system that is telling us, telling him at his desk or telling our lot attendants or our dispatchers, what's up, what's down, what's charging, what's not charging, what's working. And then having somebody that can look at our data and all of our charge cycles and then make suggestions to us as to what we need to do. It wasn't and hasn't been super important right now when we only have 25 vehicles, but with your guys' help or with whoever you're going to use, because you can't do it yourself, you need somebody that's going to help you if you want to expand to the next. Because unless you're going to have, with 400 vehicles, I would need 400 ports, and a level 2 charger is not going to work. So you need a level 3 charger. The level 2 chargers were $1,500 a piece. The level 3 chargers are $40,000-$50,000 a piece. So while you need a mix of them, you have to find out some operational efficiencies for sure.
Yeah, that's really well said. I think there's two pieces that I would love for Rich to expand on there. One is, his past experience of walking the lot and understanding which chargers are broken by coming upon them, and how what your life has been different with the software platform and what you like that to be. And then the other piece being, you mentioned you have the 25 vehicles today. It's not a majority of your fleet. What do you see as, when you start adopting more vehicles over time, the biggest changes and things that you would need to be more efficient as you start getting to that 50%, 75%, 100% of your fleet?
The first part of the question, the charge management system is, it's so much more efficient, because before we would have to, either I would send the driver out, or I would have to go out, or I send the lot person out. They would have to go look and see if the car, they have to bring the key with them to see what state of charge it is. And then they have to walk back through. You kind of see, this is probably, 100 yards from my front office. So they got to walk out there, they got to walk back, they got to turn the car on, see where it's at. So that's really wasn't very efficient. Now we can see the state of charge. We can see where they are on the what cycle is. So we usually go about 80%. So like if a Mach-E is at 80%, we're allowed to, we send the car out, or we'll take it off the level 3 and we'll put it over on the level 2 to do to top it off. So operationally, that's kind of what my lot guys does. Now he just looks at the dashboard and he can see, oh, hey, this car's done. So I can go pull it off the charger, or I can move it from the level 3 to the level 2. And then they can see that way they can look at it from just sitting at the desk. They don't have to walk out to go look at that, which is really has been a pain point for us, because, all that wasted time, right? People walking out, coming back in. Also the drivers, right? So the drivers are, they still have range anxiety. They'll get in the car, and if it's at 80, some of them freak out because like, oh, I'm not going to last my whole shift. But I don't think we've had, maybe 2 incidences where we've ever had a car where we had to tow it in, and it was one of the bolts that we had to tow it in because the guy ran out of juice. So that's pretty much that. Working with Terawatt has been a great deal, because they actually work with us and let us know what we want, right? Like, hey, what do you need to see? So they built, inside my office, like if one of the things go out, they built it to where I can just do a soft reset. In fact, I did one this morning when the chargers looked like it wasn't charging right. So we did a soft reset and it fixed it just from my office. I didn't have to call anybody. I didn't have to do any of that. So it was like a pretty easy solution, which makes it easy for me. So now I don't have to get on the phone with the tech guy. I don't have to figure it out. With our other people, we would call them. We'll be out. Well, when are you going to be out? Well, I'm in California or I'm in Utah. So take a day or so. Now it's like I can just fix it right now. So the reaction time has been very, very good. And so hopefully did that answer all your questions?
Yeah, and I'll double click. I realize I asked too many questions at once, so I can space them out. So sorry about that. But I think the last piece you highlighted is one that I talked about in my introduction. But I think the use case you gave is a perfect example where, if something breaks, which we always hope does not happen, but if a charger's down, one, how long is it taking you to realize it's down? So software platforms enable you to have the visibility, and if you're the fleet owner or manager watching it yourself, great, at least you have one step closer to finding that quickly because you're looking at it. And then if you had an added layer of terawatt, network operations center monitoring, we can be alerting to when things go down. And then also having that software ability to, as Rich did this morning, soft reset, where that's, hopefully that charger was down for 30 minutes or something like that. You're identifying it, you're resolving the problem versus slow identification of the problem, walking out, seeing that's broken, calling whoever installed the charging infrastructure, your service provider, waiting, for them to resolve. Maybe they have to send somebody out to fix it. That's potentially a day or two. That's lost business, that's lost revenue, directly for you all being a taxi company. But again, back to the point, for any sorts of fleets, having vehicles grounded is not what you want. So I'm glad you highlighted. That's a great question.
So Peter, I wanted to add, so that what has been nice working with a company that understands this and has the technicians and the wherewithal, writers of code or whatever it is that you do to do things. For us, knowing that we're going to expand to the next level to have more than 25 vehicles, we needed to experiment with and work with you to figure out these charge cycles and have some way to know as we move to 50 vehicles, we're going to need to be much more efficient about how we charge the vehicles. Mm-hmm. So again, I didn't realize this when we bought electric vehicles, but when you plug them in and charge, the majority of them charge fast up until a point, 80%. And then they maybe sometimes 85, 90%, but at some point they slow down. And when it slows down, unless you were walking out and going and paying attention, you're going to leave a car on there trying to get it to 100% way longer than you need to. It's not an efficient use of the charger. We talked to you about that. You guys built something that is identifying it. We can preset that. Tell us when it gets to 85%. It notifies us through a dashboard, so our lot attendant knows this car is at 85%. Go move it. Go get it off the level 3, put it on a level 2, or just park it and find another car. And while this is new to us and we don't really need it that bad right now, we're going to need it. So yep. It's good for us to be able to use it now, get used to it, get our lot attendants used to moving cars off of these things when they still need to be charged, but they can't charge fast. So they shouldn't be on the level 3. And having a software that manages that for us and notifies us saves us. Again, we could possibly have 25 cars plugged in at one time and to walk around and check them all to see what state of charge they're in or which ones we need to move. This just makes it much, much simpler, and it's something that for sure you're going to need when you have hundreds of cars in your fleet. So
yeah, that's real well put. And today we're obviously talking mostly about the software and the operations and maintenance side of things, but the decision to put in what amount of charging, obviously having that capability is really helpful. If do you put in one L3 or do you put in 10 L2s? If you can flip a vehicle over on the fast charger because when it's done and you use your lot attendants, maybe that's a better use case for you all when you're developing charging. It all goes together. It's really interesting. So, and I guess if there's anything to expand on, you have 25 vehicles today. If you have any learnings from, when you didn't have 25, you had the first however many versus how many you have now, have you noticed a difference? Obviously the infrastructure has been the same, but as you're adding more vehicles to your fleet, when you're maximizing the infrastructure that you have today, how did that process go? How was that for you in terms of what it meant for the infrastructure usage?
Well, so I'll let Rich expand on this, but another thing for us, in hindsight, having 25 level 2s and 2 level 3s was probably not the best split. We probably should have had 3 level 3s and less level 2s for my fleet. Again, for my fleet, because I need to double shift vehicles. If we didn't have to double shift vehicles and we could park them because they finished work at 5 o'clock and they could sit on a charger till 8 the next day, then maybe you'll have one level 3 on your lot for emergencies, to fast charge somebody that has to, going on a big trip or something. But your routine would be let them charge all night, right? But if I want to double fleet vehicles, I want more level 3s. So knowing though what I have, even the level 2s have can charge at different rates. So I didn't understand that when I bought those. Terawatt came in, looked at our entire system and told us they can actually make our level 2s charge at different rates depending on how many cars are plugged in through this smart analysis or smart charging. So that again was something we would have never done or understood. And I'll let Rich talk a little bit more about what actually you guys have allowed us to do, which I think is making our level 2s even more efficient.
Yeah, so one of the things they did too is when they came in, when they first came in, they actually looked at our capacity and they called an emergency meeting and said, it's the middle of summer. If you guys ran all of your chargers at one time with all your air conditioning, now we're in Vegas, it's 115 degrees, so like your building could catch on fire. So we're like, oh, so we immediately went out, shut a bunch of the chargers off, the level 2, so we'd make sure that we didn't catch a building on fire. Now it's cooled off, so it's a little bit better. But in that time frame, at the same time, like George said, they implemented a smart charging thing. So they take 4 chargers. If you plug one car in, it'll charge at, I think, 10 kilowatts. If you plug in 2, it'll go 5, then it goes down to 3. So depends on how many cars are charged, it knows that it'll push more energy, and then as it gets charged more, it'll actually move. It'll charge. It changes the charge amount to each one, and it's pretty good to watch because now again they're a lot more efficient. My guys get charged faster. They get charged evenly. Depends on how many are plugged in. So so that right there was a probably a very good source. When they came in and said that, I mean, it was the people that first put it in, when they first installed, no one ever told us any of that stuff, right? So I feel that Terawatt's watching out for our business at the same time. They're making sure we're safe. So, but again, the efficiency of the charge management is really good for the operation right now. I mean, we're making things a lot easier. It makes things a lot easier for us.
That's yeah.
Oh,
maybe
Pete, I wanted to add something to that. So for us, because you kind of asked about this next step and us expanding, as I spoke about earlier in my introduction, we have pretty good technology in our cars. We have these smart meters, great ways to communicate with our drivers. We have tons and tons of data from experience for running the cab company for 50 years. We know how miles and all of these things. The charge management system is one system. Our cab manager system is separate from our charge management system. As we expand to this next level, we're hoping, working with you, that it's what it's going to be is that we can notify drivers that are working, like you said, track, see where their state of charge is, let them know that they're due to charge, they need to come in early, or if they're just coming at the end of their cycle, be integrated into our cab management system to know whether that car is immediately going back out and it needs to go to a level 3 charger, or if in fact it's not going back out immediately and it basically is set up for preventive maintenance, so you can plug it at a level 2 charger. So having Terawatt work with us and be able to write the code or write whatever it is to integrate these systems, that's what's going to make us be able to go to that next level, so that my lot attendant isn't out there directing traffic. We're sending messages that are automated to the meters, telling them what stall to go to, where to go, maybe not even to plug it into charge because we know it's going out of service for a day, and we'll let the lot attendant plug it in. So again, those are the things that are going to be important to us as we move to this next stage. 25 cars with the chargers we have, we can handle, just running around. It's not efficient, but we can do it. But if we double this to 50, it has to start to get automated. So that's where having a good O&M is going to be very important.
Yeah, that's a great point, and maybe one that we open up to the audience Q&A on. But I think as you highlight, we hear from a lot of different fleets that it's a part of their business today, whatever part that might be, as it becomes more integral and becomes just the entirety of your fleet operation. Efficiencies can become crucial. Usage of the chargers, amortizing that infrastructure, the total cost of ownership, as well as what it means for the actual drivers and integrating into your operations. And so we're excited for the partnership, and it's been great so far, and appreciate all that shared learnings and much more to come. And you all being leaders in the space, it's great to have that foresight to be able to work with you. So yeah, that's really well said on all points. Eleni, I think there were some audience questions filtering in, and we can switch over to that and try to see what everyone has in store for us.
Absolutely. I want to thank all of our speakers. You've provided a lot of great insight on, how to leverage your charge management software, why the O&M services are so important to optimizing your charging, how to effectively manage charging operations, and then also some best practices. So we can now shift into our Q&A. We have had some coming in, and please, if you have more, go ahead and just throw them in the chat. And then before we get to those, I just want to quickly remind everyone that the slides from today's webinar are going to be available, and they'll be sent to all of our registrants, so we can go ahead and dive right in. So one of the questions that I had, and that I would like to ask that came in, was about optimizing the data. So we saw a great example of all of the data that you guys are managing at Terawatt, and there was a really great quote from earlier on in my career that you can't manage what you don't measure. So having all of that data coming in, we heard a great example of how monitoring state of charge informed some operational changes for Desert Cab. So can you elaborate on the different types of data that you're monitoring and how you can use that to optimize operations?
Yeah, I love that. That's a good quote. I think there's two sides of it, right? One is from the chargers themselves, and one is from the vehicles, and obviously the meeting point. So through OCPP, obviously, which is the charge management software, standard out there, you can get a certain level of data. We also engage with API integrations, both with the chargers themselves, and we can do with the fleet telematics data, what George was talking to towards the end there. Getting that holistic picture and making sure that that whole stack talks to each other. That's where you get that really big unlock of understanding, okay, I'm charging to X% and my vehicles are out in the field, and what does that mean for the view of how I can optimize my fleet? So we think that's a really crucial point that we're focused on. Again, a little different than public charging, and so we are an infrastructure developer, but having this fleet-focused stack that we've developed really helps the customers we're working with, as you heard today, know what this means for their business and be able to scale effectively and efficiently.
And I'd like to add to that, Peter, the idea of like when to charge, I know that's come up a bunch. Currently in our infrastructure, we don't pay a different rate different times of the day. So when we're charging is more determined by us. It's going to cost us the same. But as we move into this phase 2, working with Terawatt, we're going to move up to a much bigger infrastructure, 5 megawatts of power, a lot more chargers. It'll be separately metered, and when we're like that, then there are times that are peak times in demand where you don't want to be charging. So it'll be really important to have a partnership with somebody that can tell us when we should be charging to not only optimize it, but to obviously try to do it as cheaply as we can do it. So it's going to be important.
And that actually is a good segue into a follow-up question. Just if you can elaborate a bit more on how the charge management software integrates with vehicle telematics. Is it through a fleet management platform like Desert Cab was discussing, like George and Rich were mentioning?
Yeah, so that's fleet by fleet in terms of whatever telematics provider they use. But yeah, most of these are have API integrations for all sorts of things that they're doing, not related to charging, but with other pieces of fleet technology that's out there for existing internal combustion systems. So something our team engages with on a case-by-case basis.
Absolutely. Okay, so shifting gears a little bit, we also heard from Desert Cab about some of the challenges they had when they were transitioning and where they were struggling, particularly around hardware functionality, cable management and power availability. Are there other areas? I'll ask this to Peter first, and then maybe if George and Rich have other examples they want to chime in with. But do you have other examples of where you've seen your customers encounter challenges?
Sure. I mean, a lot of what we hear is, the where to start piece of how much do I build and what does this mean and can I integrate with my existing facility? I think of, George and Rich kind of talked about they were able to use their, excess power at their existing facility in their building of the infrastructure. That's something that comes up a lot when we talk to fleets of how do I size the appropriate amount today in this smaller phase when I'm starting out, or do I go full on and, as George was just talking about with the second phase, get a new service, make a more robust infrastructure development. So that's something on the kind of creation of the infrastructure side. On the operations and maintenance, I think exactly what the points that we've talked about are the ones that come up the most of data to understand what I'm looking at, alerts to understand when things go wrong, having a prevention and intervention plan. So I think there's just, a lot of it's a lot of newness and understanding what does this playbook look like for my particular business and how do I integrate it? All sorts of fleets are different. In terms of the duty cycle, George has and Rich have the double shift. Some folks only have single shift. So what it means for my business and how do I, have an action plan when things go wrong, that kind of strategy piece, I think we talked about it in different aspects, but I think that's the one that comes up the most. But I'll let George and Rich also speak to more specifics of the actual issues that arise with their infrastructure and what that looked like. I think, driving over cables is one that I hear sometimes. I know we didn't directly speak to it, but cable management is kind of the solution to fix that.
Yeah, I think that, again, when we first put it in, all of our level 2s we put on the wall, we didn't have any covers over them. We need to cover them because of the elements. But the cord management, again, from an external piece is a problem. The cords need to be long enough so that you can reach to all different types of cars, whether they're backed in or pulled in forward. If the cord's too short, you never want anybody having to back into a spot if you don't have to, because it's just leading to trouble. So you always want to be able to pull in forward. So you need a long enough cord, but then all of a sudden now you've got this extra weight to deal with. How do you manage that cord? Because the cords are heavy. I think the external part of it, the challenges for us are that even if we know something is wrong, other than putting a cover over something, we can't work on it. You need to have an electrician. You need to have somebody that's certified in doing this. And there just aren't a lot of them out there right now. But having someone like TerraWatt as a partner helps because, again, they're doing this in a lot more places than just us. So they might have some sources we don't have. Same thing with the parts, supply chains, everything that everybody's dealing with that even doesn't even do with EV charging. Just the whole supply chain issue, parts for anything. Having other sources and other people that we can talk to that can help us track down something to get it fixed. Those are the challenges because this is all so new and everybody just put this stuff out and got it out there and keeping it up and running is a whole nother deal that I don't want to have to deal with because I want to run a cab company, not a charging infrastructure company. So.
Yeah, I'll add to that also. Obviously the communication piece, right? So that was one of our pinch points was our system wasn't communicating with each other. So all the level 2 chargers weren't like talking, so we couldn't manage them properly. So TerraWatt came out and they put in a Wi-Fi unit so they can, so that now they're all talking to each other and they're all in sync. So that actually helps us manage the system because before we were getting spotty data, right? So we didn't know if one was working or not working. Then you walk out there and it is working, but now everything's all on the same management tool, or same platform, so we can see. So they're all talking to each other, and they have some redundancy where they actually have some SIM cards in there that are cell phone data. So that right there is another part that they came out, identified that, and helped us fix that. So that was another big issue that we had that we didn't even know we had.
Yeah, Elaine, to you can't track what you can't see. If you can't have connectivity to the chargers, you don't know if it's on or it's broken. You hope it's working, and that was kind of the issue that we resolved there, which is great.
Right.
Right, exactly, which actually brings me to my next question about maintenance. So we saw you gave a really nice overview of how kind of the first step of that, which is that remote monitoring. Do you guys does Terawatt have in-house maintenance teams? Do you guys contract out? How does that work?
Yeah, so we do have in-house capability, and a lot of the work we've been doing at Desert Cab has been with the in-house certified technicians that we have working for us. In some cases, we will also outsource when necessary, and it's kind of just whatever's the most efficient, effective way to service our partners. But definitely something that, scheduling becomes something that, when you rely on a third party, you can only control so much because that's not in your control. So with meeting certain uptimes, obviously, having people that work for Terawatt to solve Terawatt problems for our partners makes that a really short turnaround. So something that's been really helpful working with George and Rich is being able to, meet their needs really quickly by using our in-house staff.
Excellent. And then building off of that, we have a pretty specific question about, what would happen to the system in the event of a power outage? Does the system kind of restart remotely? Does it take someone physically to kind of push some buttons? How does that work to get us back online?
Yeah, thankfully these devices are pretty smart, and I've had the experience where my oven gives me like the blaring alarm clock thing when the power goes out, but these do restart themselves, and then also obviously in a case where something's not functioning correctly after a power outage, the software will be able to give us insight into what's going on. George and Rich, I don't believe you've had any instances of power outages, but if you do, please feel free to add.
We have, not to my knowledge.
We've actually had a couple days where the power went out, but the system just starts right back up. Like you said, it just comes right back on. It's not down. But usually our power outage was like, it only went out for 30 seconds and it comes back on. But still, it did start back up. So it's pretty still.
Excellent. George, Rich didn't need to bother you with that because it came right back on. So. So I think we have time for one more question, and it kind of builds off something that that Desert Cab was discussing in terms of their power availability. How can or does Terawatt help mitigate grid constraints? How can we work to maximize or optimize the power that's available and make sure that we're charging adequately?
Yeah, that's a great question. That's kind of the situation we're in with George and Rich, assessing that, they were at risk of blowing their transformer by being over capacity. If it was the peak of summer in Las Vegas where they're based, obviously air conditioning is probably pretty crucial to survival. It's something that, our smart charging algorithm takes into place. So if you are on the same electric service as the rest of your facility, we can take a look, and maybe the lights are turned off overnight and at your building and you're charging overnight, great, we can use that extra capacity for charging, and then maybe limit it during the day, knowing when your load is higher. So things that we consider if you are using existing power availability at your facility, or you actually realize that, okay, great, we don't have enough power today at the facility, we have to make an upgrade to meet our fleet needs, something that we can engage with utility engagement. We have a team that handles that for our sites and for customer sites to understand, what is the most efficient way to get to your desired charging output.
And I would add to that as we go into our next phase 2, which we got $1.5 million grant from the government to put in more charging infrastructure and bring in a much bigger transformer. We wanted a partner who has some experience in this to basically help us do this, make sure that we're doing it right, and hoping that the data we gather now is going to help us make determinations as to how many and how we buy the chargers moving forward. So worked out good.
Yes, absolutely. And that's a great point, because a lot of utilities are offering funding to help upgrade power at your site. So that's certainly something that fleets can take advantage of. Well, I just want to thank everyone again. This brings us to the top of the hour. We got through all of our Q&A, so I'm pleased about that. So thank you everyone for joining us, especially our panelists. You guys will receive a follow-up email, including a recording of this webinar, along with the presentation slides. The recording will also be posted onto ACT News, onto our ACT News website. And as a reminder, please fill out that quick survey that will pop up as you're leaving the webinar. And again, enjoy the rest of your week. Thank you so much, and take care, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks for joining. Thank you.